Hello, my name is Joey Pauletich, and the TED Talk I chose was How Video Games Turn Players into Storytellers, explained by David Cage. David Cage is the founder of a studio called Quantic Dreams, whose main specialty revolves around decision-making and storytelling games, such as Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human. David Cage shows off the big ideas of choices in storytelling. It is clear that when you are watching a story being told, like a TV show or a movie or even a play, the choices have already been predetermined, and the conclusion will not change no matter how many times you watch the piece. In Quantic Dreams games, the story is ever branching out, letting you, the player, choose the destiny and the fate of the character or characters you play as. The branches that you see is actually the choices you can make from one of the situations called the hostage situation you see in the original TED Talk video. Choosing the fate of a character brings out a personal side of the protagonist and draws you in, while also creating a bond between character and player. The main focus of this talk in particular is a newer game called Detroit Become Human. In the game, the player switches between stories and perspectives of three vastly different but similar androids, named Connor, Kara, and Marcus. The team at Quantic Dreams created these three androids to have entirely different personalities, but one similar goal: to become human, to be realized as sentient, feeling, and being. Having something like androids and being set in the near future feels eerily real to the players of Detroit Become Human, and the decisions that you make feel incredibly real, especially as you begin to consider the feelings and the amount of lifelikeness that the androids have, and the feelings that they display. Playing as if the androids are real and giving them real human emotions and feelings will begin to give them software instability. Eventually, this can lead for your choice for them to become completely deviant from their software, or human, if you will. As mentioned, you will eventually have a choice to become deviant based on your behavior. Becoming deviant opens up androids to many more human emotions, as well as rebellion against humans who disrespected their emotions and their well-being. Addressing an issue such as humanity and real feelings is all too real topic for this point in time. As technology progresses, these things become closer to reality every day. In Detroit Become Human, you choose a side when it comes to androids that you have come to know. Interactive games make the player of the game not only like a writer of the game, but also like an actor and a director, as David Cage mentions in the talk. Playing Detroit Become Human is about 10 hours of non-stop gameplay, not including replaying scenes for alternate endings or going back to earn trophies by completing certain goals or certain endings. Now, I would like to add a personalness of the main characters of Detroit Become Human. As I mentioned before, each character has a vastly different life and have arrived at their circumstances by several different means. Connor is an android designed for the police and also detective work. This particular Connor android used in the story is partnered with a human detective named Hank. At the start of their story, Hank is leery about Connor because he's an android, and of course he doesn't trust him. In fact, he pushes him away. One of the first decisions you make is how to talk to Hank and how to approach your relationship. By analyzing Hank's desk, you can gather some personal information about him, like his son or his dog, and bring it up in conversation with him to gain his trust. Personally, I chose to befriend Hank as much as I could. As cases with him carry on, Connor has many choices to spare other androids' life, or to turn them into the police force. As mentioned before, this affects his software instability. Being too humane and friendly with the androids can cause problems within the force, as his bosses begin to suspect that Connor is not doing the job that he's programmed to do, which can lead your Connor android to being replaced with an identical make of Connor himself. Obviously, this is a large chunk of the plot in the game, especially if you value your relationship with Hank, and work to prove that you are the original Connor model whom he trusts. Connor and Hank's storyline eventually intertwines with the stories of Kara and Marcus, and the choices are being had to be involving Connor and Marcus themselves. Now we come to Marcus. Marcus is an android that was employed as a caretaker for an old artist named Carl. At the beginning of Marcus's storyline, you care for Carl and assist him around his house. It later plays out that Carl's son is begging him for money for illegal drugs, and eventually steals Carl's art to sell for cash. When confrontation arises between Carl and his son, Marcus rushes to protect Carl and his son calls the police. As his son falls to the ground hurt, he yells to the police that Marcus assaulted him, leaving the police to drag him from the home. Waking up in a junkyard, Marcus fights for parts to repair his broken body. Landing away from this, Marcus is upset that he was demeaned and not believed by the police just because he's an android. This leads him to join and eventually lead a group of androids called Jericho. Leading throughout the game, leading the group, you can decide how to protest to earn rights for the androids, aggressively or peacefully. You can also help recruit more androids, as well as Marcus's relationship with the androids Artie and Jericho when he arrives. As mentioned, the storyline eventually intertwines with Connor and Kara as well. Finally, we have Kara. She is an android that was brought for the purpose of babysitting and housekeeping in a house with a man named Todd and his daughter Alice, aged approximately around 8. Quickly, it is established that you are a repaired version of Kara that Todd once owned, and your name is re-established to you as your memory was wiped with the repair. Returning back home, it is a wreck, and it is your duty to clean the house and prepare dinner for Todd and Alice. Meanwhile, Todd sits in front of the TV, getting high while half asleep, watching a sports game. After finishing the task, but before starting dinner, you may look around the house, including the upstairs. During dinner, Todd goes on a rampage, revealing that Alice's mother left him, and he is obviously very impacted by that. As Kara, you have to come up with a plan to help escape with Alice, and if you choose to disobey Todd, who tells you not to interfere. In an effort to escape, you have an option to kill Todd with the gun you found, if you found it while searching through the house, or simply run away through a door or an open window. Throughout the entire story, Kara cares for Alice, making sure she has a place to sleep, food to eat, and that she stays warm during the winter. Kara knows that eventually the truth will come out and Alice will be taken away from her if they do not run over to the border, over to Canada. Kara eventually meets a woman named Rose, who helps sympathize with deviant androids, and who helps them escape to Canada, where there is more rights for androids than there is in the United States. Eventually, Kara and Alice also meet up with Marcus at Jericho before crossing over to Canada, which proves to be a challenge in every aspect for them and the player. Now that you know about the main characters, it is easy to see why living in their shoes and making their decisions can become such a quite difficult task as a player, especially when you don't know the endings that come as a result of your decision. There are many loaded moments in the game that you can easily regret from a split-second decision. I would also like to add that Quantic Dreams is not the only developer of these story-based games. Another developer that makes many storytelling games is Telltale, which created games like Telltale's Batman, Tales from the Borderlands, The Wolf Among Us, and Telltale's The Walking Dead. All these games are amazing choice-driven games, but sadly Telltale Games has shut its doors for good and declared bankruptcy, leaving Quantic Dreams as the bigger developer for these types of games, which are growing in popularity. This brings us to the question portion of the video. It is obvious that games like Detroit Become Human and Quantic Dreams' other fantastic games lead you, the player, on a wild adventure that leaves you stunned and with much to think about. These games challenge your intelligence, your quick wit, and your humanity, as well as your problem-solving skills and how you work under pressure. Although they are only video games, the scenarios feel extremely real, and their choices are often very hard to make, even though they have no impact on your real life once you put the controller down. Question 1. How do you feel about storytelling games? Do they pull you in and give you a personal experience? For myself, as it's seen from the rest of the video, I have very personal experiences from games like Detroit Become Human, as well as all the Telltale games. Living through the lives of these very different human characters opens my mind to so many different situations that others experience. These games also show up visions of the future, like Detroit Become Human does, and perhaps how things could end up, and maybe how to handle them if situations like those arose in the future. Question number 2. Do you think that video games make people more creative and better storytellers? I think that the intricacy of video games, from their programming to their creative design and direction, to their playability, allows artists and even regular people to create true works of art. Especially since regular people can pick up their work of art and spend hours upon hours interacting with it and playing with it, and it's an extraordinary experience. I think that for myself, these amazing games with these intense storylines have made me a more creative person, a more articulate person, and overall just a more open person to new experiences. I think that with technology advancing, games like these will only get more popular and more intricate and involved, which is a great thing. Working in a place like GameStop allows me to interact with people on a daily basis that come out of their social shells to talk about games, and they get so excited when their energy is matched because someone else loves games as much as they do. I've seen countless drawings, book ideas, and even game ideas come from stories that people have played in games. Games are one of those things that let creativity flow in people. Ideas flood people's minds for creation when they truly take part in the stage that is video games. Question 3. Do you think games make people better decision makers? I think that the quick thinking and reflexes in storytelling games like Detroit Become Human not only make people better decision makers, but also quicker thinkers. It lets people think quickly about their outcomes and consequences their decision could possibly have, especially in games where you can't go back and change what you did, or when you develop an attachment to the story and its characters you play as. Lastly, I want to touch on David Cage and his achievements. He is the founder and CEO of Quantic Dreams, of course. Along with the Quantic Dreams cast have been nominated for many awards, including BAFTA Game Awards for Gameplay for Heavy Rain in 2011, BAFTA Game Awards for Artistic Achievement in 2011, 2014, and 2019, BAFTA Game Awards for Best Game for Heavy Rain in 2011, and BAFTA Game Awards for Audio Achievement in 2019 for Detroit Become Human. Together, they also won BAFTA Game Awards for story and game innovation. When creating games, David Cage wanted to show off the different emotions games can bring out in people. He was quoted saying the following: "Many people out there are not interested in games because games are always about the same things. They're about violent actions played in loops. But they're also about a very limited set of emotions. They're always about anger, fear, frustration, competition, and adrenaline in general. These emotions trigger strong physical responses, but at the same time, they're just a very limited part of what you can feel."